There's a moment every grower knows too well. That walk through the garden when the soil crunches underfoot, the leaves are curled like old parchment, and the heat of the day feels like it's pulling the life out of everything you planted. For anyone who studies the past, you already know this struggle is not new. Farmers from the Sahel to ancient Palestine fought the same battle against relentless sun and evaporating moisture. But every once in a while you stumble on a method, one so old and so simple, that it challenges your assumptions about modern gardening altogether. That was the moment that changed everything for me. My soil went from desert dry to consistently moist, even in the heat of the season. And the trick wasn't watering more or adding expensive fertilizers. It was a mulch method that transformed my entire plot almost overnight. And once you understand how it works, you'll never let your soil bake into dust again. The real reason soil dries out is rarely the amount of water you give it. It took me far too long to understand that dryness isn't always caused by lack of rain. The deeper issue is exposure. Bare soil loses moisture the same way a clay pot loses water on a stove. Steady, unavoidable evaporation. When direct sun hits unprotected soil, it breaks down organic matter faster, kills beneficial microbes, and causes fine particles to harden into a crust. That crust then blocks water from penetrating. So even when you do irrigate, much of the moisture either runs off or evaporates before your plants can use it. Early travellers and settlers knew this instinctively. Accounts from frontier diaries often mention laying down straw or forest duff around crops to keep the wet locked in the earth. They didn't have scientific terminology for soil structure or microbial activity, but they knew protective cover kept their crops alive when water was scarce. Mulch works because it changes the soil environment rather than just covering it. The moment I committed to real mulching, not the thin decorative layer many gardeners settle for, the soil began to behave differently. With a thick enough layer, the sunlight no longer reached the soil surface. That single change slowed evaporation dramatically. Below that protective blanket, the moisture stayed trapped in a cooler, darker, more stable microclimate. Suddenly, the soil stayed crumbly instead of hard. Worms returned. Even watering became easier because the mulch acted like a sponge, absorbing and slowly releasing moisture downward. This is the same principle traditional farmers used centuries ago when they covered their fields with cut weeds, leaves, or chopped stems after harvest. They weren't mulching for aesthetics, they were engineering a living moisture shield. To apply this method effectively, the thickness and choice of material matter more than people expect. For example, in a hot, dry climate, a farmer might pile 8 to 15 centimetres of dry grass, wood chips or shredded bark around crops. Someone growing in cooler weather may use less. When I revived my beds, I used a mix of partly decomposed leaves and fresh-cut plant material to build a dense but breathable layer. Anyone can do the same by collecting fallen leaves, using grass clippings from mowing, or gathering maize stalks after harvest. The goal is to build it thick enough that sunlight cannot reach the soil, but loose enough that water still moves through it. Once the mulch was down, the garden didn't just stay moist, it started regenerating. The constant presence of organic matter encouraged fungal networks to spread, the kind that feed plant roots and improve nutrient access. Over time, the mulch broke down and fed the soil, allowing me to reduce fertilizer use dramatically. A gardener who wants immediate results can spread mulch around existing plants, watering deeply first so the moisture stays locked in. Someone beginning a new bed can cover bare soil well before planting season. After a few weeks, the soil underneath becomes soft, rich, and biologically active. This is exactly how ancient Mediterranean farmers prepared land before sowing, by letting plant residues sleep on the earth until the soil absorbed their goodness. It's also worth noting that mulching is a crucial survival technique when water is scarce. In a scenario where you have only a few buckets of water per week on a homestead or small farm, mulched soil can stretch that supply dramatically. I've tested this by running 2 beds side by side during a dry spell. The bare soil bed required watering every 2 days just to keep plants alive. The mulched bed stayed fully hydrated for nearly a week. That difference alone can determine whether a garden thrives or collapses during drought conditions. The mulch method becomes most effective when you tailor it to your environment. Different regions call for different materials and depths. In rainy climates, a lighter mulch prevents slugs from hiding. In arid areas, heavier mulch stabilizes temperature swings and stops intense evaporation. Someone with access to livestock bedding can use straw or hay. Someone in a forested region can gather leaf litter. Someone in a dry savanna landscape can chop and drop biomass like pigeon pea, moringa, or cassava stems. The principle stays the same, but the execution adapts to what nature provides. When you apply the method consistently through a full season, you start seeing longer growth periods, healthier root systems, and soil that stays dark and moist long after your neighbours' gardens have dried into powder. This mulch method didn't just save my soil, it changed the way I think about growing altogether. It's a strategy rooted in history, validated by survivalist wisdom, and strengthened by modern understanding of soil biology. If you take the time to apply it properly, you'll notice the same transformation. Cooler soil, stronger plants, and moisture that sticks around even in punishing heat. If this guide helped you, make sure you subscribe to the channel, share the video with fellow growers, and help keep these time-tested techniques alive for the next generation of gardeners and enthusiasts.